Hi, this is Zach from Worn&Wound. Today I'll be taking a look at the Zodiac Seawolf re-edition. For those of you who aren't aware, Zodiac is a brand that has been around for a long time, or was around for a very long time, and this is one of their iconic watches, was the Seawolf. It was a dive watch that was first unveiled in 1953, making it one of the first modern dive watches, right alongside the Rolex Submariner and the Blancpain 50 Fathoms. Zodiac's was one of the just real innovators in the kind of the tool dive market. And it was a very, very popular watch. It was available at PX stores for military use, and it was affordable, so it was just, and had like a very good water rating at the time. We actually have an excellent article about it, which I'll link to in the review, to an article on the original vintage watch. Just an exceptionally cool watch. They're still available. The vintage watches are still available for actually relatively decent prices, though they've been beat up a lot. They're hard to find in very good condition, and especially the date version, the movement is very hard, has parts in it that you basically can't replace. So, you just have to be careful with them. So anyway, these days, Zodiac is currently owned by Fossil. They bought the brand, I believe, in the late 90s, and it kind of sat a little bit dormant for a while, and in the last couple of years they've been bringing it back with this Heritage series, and we've already reviewed the Sea Dragon, and we took a look at the Super Seawolf in Basel this year. But this is definitely the most exciting of the releases to date, because this is their iconic watch, and it's a beautiful watch, just a classic dive watch design, and I think the market is really ready for this kind of vintage dive watch to be offered again. And they did a really good job of it. So all too often you see watches that are brought back, kind of reimagined, and they took the original watch, which was a small watch because it was vintage. In the case of the Zodiac Seawolf, the original was around 35 millimeters, so it's actually a very small watch, especially for a dive watch by today's standards. But they didn't up it to 44 millimeters or something ridiculous and gigantic. Instead, they went with a 39 millimeter case, which is a really great modern kind of mid-small size, making it just a very comfortable sport watch. And they just, really stuck to the details in a good way, changed things a little bit like here and there, but, I think had a solid execution. There's a bunch of different styles of it. We'll show you another one later that's a limited edition, but this is really the core style, the classic style, black dial, steel bezel, which is really simple, really pure, has a definite vintage look to it. It has an MSRP of $1,195. That's on this Jubilee style bracelet. I think you could probably already find it for less through sales stores or whatever, but that is just the starting price of it. It features the STP 11-1 automatic movement, which is Fossil's sort of ETA 2824 clone. We'll show that to you later. So yeah, it's a really solid watch, great looking watch. So let's get into it. In the case of the Zodiac Seawolf re-edition, as I said in the intro, they stuck very closely to the original, but they just made it larger, making it more modern and actually, in my opinion, more wearable and just the right size. I mean, it's a really great size. So it's 39 millimeters diameter at the edge of the bezel. So that means it wears actually probably a little bit smaller than 39 even. But with the bezel there, it has the substance and the mass of like a nice size sport watch. It's about 47.6 millimeters lug to lug, with a 20 millimeter lug width. So the lug to lug is actually pretty long, but it is in keeping with the proportions of the original. And I think that, in my opinion, longer lugs, that kind of relationship works actually very well at this size. It becomes problematic when you have larger watches, because then the lug to lug will actually span over your wrist. But when the watch is a little bit smaller, you can get away with longer lugs. That makes it sit a little bit better and not feel like it's kind of sucked up on the top of the wrist, but kind of still fit the wrist well. So I think these proportions are really nice. Then in height, it's about 12.5 millimeters tall, and that's to the top of this domed sapphire crystal here. Obviously the original, because it was from the 50s, 60s, would have had an acrylic crystal, so they updated that to be sapphire. But they did a good job of giving it a little bit of a vintage look. So it has this kind of step up lip here. So you have this nice kind of edge, which does provide the tiniest bit of distortion around. So there's almost a little bit of a feel of acrylic, though you do have, the scratch resistance of a modern sapphire crystal there. Frankly, for my taste, they could have gone with an acrylic crystal. I love acrylic crystals, but I definitely understand the choice for sapphire here. Off 3, you have a screw-down crown. It's about 6.5 millimeters wide, by about like 3 millimeters long, so it's actually kind of wide and flat, and it's totally flat on the side. Very purposeful looking. It's actually unsigned, which is kind of surprising, to be honest. It doesn't have a little Zodiac logo on there. I'd have to check if that's a reference to the original, to be honest. But either way, it's very easy to grasp. It doesn't get in your way. It's just a very simple, purposeful crown. And it kind of relates to this. This design was not an ornamental watch by nature. It's a sports watch. It was a tool dive watch. It was really, there's nothing fussy about it. I mean, you can even see this bezel here by modern standards. Modern bezels have a lot more color in them. They have a lot more markings. This was just very purposeful. You just had notches, no paint on this kind of classic style. I believe the original ones were actually plated brass, which is part of the problems with the vintage one, just that plating comes off, so you have a weird kind of brass color underneath. Obviously, this is solid steel. It's a 120 click unidirectional bezel. It's nice and snappy. No complaints there. It's definitely decent. Flipping the watch over now. On this model, the kind of classic model, you have a display case back, and inside you can see that STP movement there. It's honestly, it's a nice looking movement. It is virtually, at least to my eyes, like identical to what a 2824 looks like, but they do decorate it nicely. So you have perlage all over, and then you have a decorated rotor with various graining on it and a little Zodiac symbol there. So, it's nice to look at. The dial of the Zodiac Seawolf Re-edition is very close to the original. One obvious thing is that, the original model came in two versions, date and non-date. The date version was actually called the Datographic. So this is a date version, obviously, as you can see. I think a lot of people would love to see, myself included, a non-date version, just for the sake of symmetry and because that is kind of the more iconic one, but I do understand brands like Fossil, Swatch Group brands, they do tend to put dates in all their watches to make it kind of more marketable. But so this is just, in that reference, just the date version of the dial. But otherwise, it's very similar. They did a really good job of kind of copying the original elements, the most distinct elements being these large loomed triangles with metal inserts for the numbers on them at 12, 6, and 9. You can imagine if there was one at 3, 2, you'd have a much more kind of striking and bold design there with all those arrows pointed in. It's actually a design that you'll see also on the Eterno Contiki, which is another watch from around this time, another dive watch. But it has a very period feel to it, and you've applied markers, loomed strips around with the steel surrounds for the other hours rather, and then you just have white hash marks in between them. Very clean, very simple. Lume on this watch is fantastic. They did a really good job with it. It's super bright, so no concerns there. Then, at 3 here, you have the date window. It's really just because these markers are so bold that it feels like there's a gap there, which is, I think part of the, why having the non-date version would be so nice. You obviously have it with a white date on a black disc, so it does match well. It doesn't, have like a weird contrast issue to it. Looking at the hands are a replica of the classic hands. These are really awesome hands. They're just long, thin triangles with a split of metal down the center, kind of bisecting those lume fillings. I believe actually the very earliest versions of the Zodiac Seawolf had all lume. Then they went to this version a little bit later on, but this is definitely more of a distinct look, so I think it was a good choice for them. Looking at the bezel, I talked about this quickly. This bezel is all steel, the lume pip at 12. And very simple markings, very vintage looking. This is an interesting set of markings here. So, you have the typical kind of dive markings to 15 for the individual minutes, with kind of longer markings at 5, but then actually little triangles every 3 minutes. So that's like a slightly different breakdown of the time there. As somebody who's not a diver, I imagine that relates closely to diving. But it is something to me, is kind of distinctive about the Zodiac Seawolf designs. Then you just have notches. You have 30 at 30, and you don't have a 45. So it's very clean, very simple looking. I think it's very attractive, especially in steel. You don't see bezels like this very often anymore. It's really beautiful with this just brushed steel look and then engraving. On the dial surface itself, you have the logo, the applied Zodiac logo under 12, the word Zodiac, and then above 6, automatic 200 meters / 660 feet. Totally expected, but there is something missing, which I think kind of is a bit unfortunate, which is the word Seawolf. The originals had below Zodiac, Seawolf in script. It's very attractive. Once again, would have been sticking with the vintage feel of the watch and just the staying true to that original. So I don't really know what the logic was behind leaving that out, and it is a bit of a disappointment. On the wrist, the Zodiac Seawolf wears exceptionally well. I think it's, like I said, it's perfectly sized. Fits my 7-inch wrist just kind of ideally. It has mass to it, it has presence to it, but it's not it's not oversized at all, and it's just you're really at a sweet spot in terms of size. I mean, 39 millimeters sounds smaller than it is, I think just because we're used to larger number watches, but I mean, this is really, it has a lot of presence to it. I mean, just the steel on the bezel adds to it. The length of these lugs really, makes it fit well. Like I was saying before, it makes it travel across the wrist enough. If they were pulled in, the whole watch would seem just kind of like it's like floating on the center of my wrist, which would be more dramatic actually without the bracelet on. But as is, I think it's really ideal. Fits well, it's comfortable. That's one thing I've actually noted with this watch that you sometimes forget about. I mean, I've worn this watch quite a bit. It's very comfortable to watch. You can easily wear all day, no concern, not notice it. It never gets kind of uncomfortable on the wrist or feels heavy or anything like that. And yet it's a solid little sport watch, I mean, it's not like a 500-meter diver, a 1,000-meter diver. It's not going to be for, a person looking for a really high depth rating, but a 200-meter water-ready sport watch, vintage styling. There's just a lot to like about it here because, you're really getting the vintage look accurately. You're getting a bit of a vintage feel with the size, but you're getting a very solid, modern-built watch. So, I mean, it's just kind of ideal for that. The bracelet that they put it on is a Jubilee-style bracelet that is, once again, accurate to the original. I believe there were 2 styles of bracelets. There was a stretch oyster style bracelet on early ones. Those are very rare. And then a Jubilee style by JB Champion, as I recall. And they recreated this bracelet fantastically. I don't know if you've ever worn a Jubilee style bracelet. They're amongst the most comfortable style bracelets. They have a lot of flex to them, as you can see, so they're not like super rigid and stiff. And on a watch that's a bit lighter like this, I feel like that works because you don't need the rigidity to hold the watch in place. So you just have something that's really comfortable. Then they have this classic style clasp, but actually has a little bit of stretch to it, which is fantastic because once again, it kind of like, gives during the day a little bit if you get sweaty, if you get hot, so that just adds to the comfort a lot. It is an interesting clasp, so it just flips open and you actually, slide the bracelet off like that. So it's not like a sealed loop of a bracelet. Solid end links, brushed and polished finish. It's really a fantastic bracelet. They did an excellent job on it. But with the vintage styling of this watch, we're actually going to show it to you on one of our Model 2 straps now, which also looks fantastic. Now just to show you this leather option, this is one of our black Horween Model 2 straps. We designed this to have a vintage style, so it works really well, obviously, with a vintage style watch. This is just to show you really, I think how you can change the look and feel of this watch. Because it is a vintage inspired watch, it works kind of ideally with this style of strap, which also plays off of the long lugs nicely. I feel like, this actually makes the case more pronounced than the bracelet does. So yeah, just once again, you can totally kind of change the look and feel of it in this way. And you could also totally use a nylon strap, or probably find, it'd actually be very cool if you could find like a tropical style rubber strap to use as well. Now just to show you a totally different version of the Seawolf. It's still in the same line, it's still the same pricing, but it has clearly very different looks. This is the limited edition version. They don't really change the name at all, which makes it a little bit confusing, so it's another Seawolf. Like I said, the Seawolf line was massive and it ranged many, many years, so there's a plethora of versions, to ones with buzzsaw bezels and really crazy things, but this was another kind of one of the older models as I believe, and it was really like, this was more of the kind of dive version, if you will. Like this was the officer's version, more kind of military style, and this one was more of the compression diving watch, as at least I've been told. And it has kind of more bold markings on it, and obviously it's just a whole different style of marking. Visually, I actually prefer this one over this one quite a bit. There's just something about the look there that is just so interesting to me, whereas this one's kind of chunky and blocky. It's not ugly or anything like that, it's just a different look and feel. The other big difference, and this is interesting, is the acrylic bezel insert. So there were definitely versions of these with acrylic bezels inserts, and there was an interesting kind of white version one. This is actually a very, very light turquoise, but it almost looks like an aged white or something like that. And it's a cool color. It's like hard to kind of put your finger on what exact color it is. Is it a gray? Is it a blue? Is it a white that's just not saturated? But in this colorway, it's kind of interesting on the light silver dial. It has just a very strange kind of feel to it. So another difference on this model is that the crown is a little bit different. It's larger and has a ball end to it. Once again, having kind of a more vintage feel to it. A little bit less of a tool watch feel like this crown does. I actually, between the two, I might prefer this crown just because it's so blunt and like, it's just not fussy at all. And then the case back on this one is actually a solid case back. So, I think they have the same depth rating, but I think, back when this one might have had a higher depth rating than that, something like that. But yeah, so there's just another option, and there's different versions of it. Once again, there's a black dial with a green bezel, black dial with a red bezel. So if this aesthetic is more suited, more interesting to you than this one, you have a variety of options here as well. To wrap up with the Zodiac Seawolf Re-Edition, I think that they did a really excellent job with it. It's a comfortable watch. It's a faithful watch in many ways to the original, but also a well reinterpreted watch. I think, like I said, you too often see reinterpretations kind of go a little bit awry, whereas this one kind of nailed the right thing. So you got the aesthetic right, and most importantly, they sized it correctly. I mean, they changed the size, they modernized it a bit, but they made it just a really good, comfortable, just practical size. Like, I mean, it's one of these watches, like the Sin 556i, which is about the same size, that convinces you 39 millimeters is what you want for a good daily wearing sport watch, a good tool watch, because it's just comfortable, it's easy to wear, and it's effective. It's not over the top, and it's not too small. It's right in the middle, and it's really kind of ideal. Otherwise, the aesthetic of this watch, I think, spot on. Very cool, very wearable, fun-looking watch. Obviously, there's the other version as well, if you want something with a little bit of a different character. Once again, still a vintage character, though. So either way, you're getting that kind of original look and feel. There's a couple of little things I would change. I would love to see Seawolf on the dial, and I think I would love to see a non-date version, but, both of those are neither deal breakers nor terribly hard for the brand to fix if they choose to. Regarding the price, so that might be kind of the caveat of it all. I mean, $1,195 MSRP is no small amount of money, and I think there's still the kind of issue of the movement being from an untrusted brand in some sense. I mean, it's Fossil, it's a giant brand. They're not making, if they're making a Swiss-made automatic movement, which is what they say they're doing here, it's not going to be low quality. In our time with it, the movement has worked well, but it's not ETA, it's not Miyota, it's not a brand that we're very familiar with or that people have used a lot, and obviously it's only available to them. So, the pricing might be a little high for people, and I mean, I understand that. I think the build quality is there. I think it's a very satisfying watch, extremely well-made bracelet. If it was $800, it'd be more compelling. With $600, even more. But you can't have everything. But in the end of the day, it's still just a very good, very enjoyable, well-made watch. So please read the full review on Worn&Wound. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thank you.